of a gay hate crime. Well, joining me live now from Canberra is the Assistant Treasurer, Michael Sukkar. Good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. So first of all, the backtrack from snapback language, it's a bit of a tongue twister, but there seems to be a bit of a shift in the language that is being used. I mean, does that suggest that things are worse than you expected?
Good to be with you, Peter. I don't agree that there's been a change in language. I mean, what we have said from the beginning is that this would be a devastating thing for the economy, which seems pretty self-evident, that we would put in place a whole lot of programs to cushion the blow for Australians, whether that's payments to households, direct payments, or whether it's the coronavirus supplement, essentially $1,100 a month through JobSeeker, or whether it's keeping people connected to their employment through the $1,500 fortnight JobKeeper payment, in addition to cash flow support for business. So from the beginning, we have said we are going to put in place a whole suite of policies to cushion the blow. We have said if we can get on top of the health issues as soon as possible, that it will give us the greatest possible chance to, on the other side of the crisis, take advantage of what will hopefully be economic opportunities around the world. Now, that hasn't changed. I think, Peter, actually, we've probably exceeded many people's expectations as to the health outcomes, and I'd expect that that has a positive impact on the economic outcomes as well.
Okay, well, just on that, let's talk about JobKeeper. So when should that begin to be phased out?
Well, Peter, that's been legislated for 6 months as part of that legislation as well.
You can phase it out earlier.
Review at 3 months. No, it's a 6-month program. It's being reviewed by Treasury at 3 months. We're 6 weeks into it. So I think it's probably a bit premature to be talking about that. I know that there are 800,000 businesses who have enthusiastically enrolled in the scheme, which covers something like 5.7 million employees now. So it's been an absolute lifeline, as many small businesses have said, for the economy. But we're 6 weeks into it. I think it's probably a bit premature to be talking about its phase out.
Well, Jason Falinski says it should happen when schools go back. Do you agree?
Well, it's a 6-month legislated program, Peter. So that's the legislation. That's what we all voted on. That's what we all agreed upon. And Treasury will review it at the halfway mark to see how it's going and to see whether it's meeting its objectives. I think pretty clearly from the feedback that we've been receiving as a government, it's meeting the mark. It's meeting the objectives of keeping people connected to their employment and, importantly, giving those employers a wage subsidy that means they can continue operating their business, in many cases in pretty extremely modified circumstances. So I think the early news of JobKeeper is that it's an extraordinarily popular program doing important work for the economy. But I don't think 6 weeks into it, we should be talking at this stage about its phase out.
Okay, Jason Falinski's wrong then.
I know people are entitled to raise their views, but again, it's a 6-month program, Peter.
But it would stand to reason.
That's what we all voted on. That's what we all agreed upon.
It would stand to reason, though, that you'd want to preserve as much money as possible, though, right?
Well, Peter, again, it's a 6-month program. It's a temporary program. It's not a program that's been put in place in perpetuity. We put it in place in a temporary fashion, like all of the work we've done. All of the programs we put in place are there to deal with what we hope is as temporary as possible crisis of the pandemic, and consistent with all of those policies, it has an end date. But it's been legislated for 6 months.
Okay.
It'll be reviewed by Treasury after 3. That's baked into the legislation. That's uncontroversial. And at this stage, 6 weeks in, I think it's a bit premature for you and I to be labouring the point as to where it goes. We think, and my expectation is, it'll be a program that will be required for the legislated period.
Okay. Well, when that legislated period comes to an end at the end of the September quarter, what is your modelling telling you at the moment about the unemployment rate? I know you've already said that it's expected to be around 10% at the end of the June quarter, but when those extra payments stop at the end of September, whether it's JobKeeper or JobSeeker, what is the level? What is the unemployment level that you're expecting at this stage?
Well, a lot of it will depend on where the restrictions go, Peter, as you understand. So I mean, one of the things that we have said publicly is once the sorts of very hard restrictions that have been in place are eased, that quite quickly, up to 850,000 people will be able to enter the workforce again, whether they are people who have been virtually locked out of their employment because they work in hospitality and they're literally not open. So there's a cohort of around that 850,000 mark of people who will quite quickly be able to move back into the workforce. But again, it all depends on how quickly we get back to, in a sense, as close to a business as usual economy. Obviously, the harder and the longer the restrictions are, the higher that unemployment number would necessarily be.
Just one more question, if you wouldn't mind. I mean, the talks at the moment around an escalating trade war between Australia and China. Simon Birmingham was on the show a little bit earlier and he was downplaying any fears that there would be a trade war. But you've got the dairy industry that's trying to seek some face time with the government at the moment. I mean, can you assure them that they won't be caught up in it?
Well, look, the great thing is, Peter, we've done, as a government, more for trade than any government before us, whether it's opening up new markets for our free trade agreements with China, Korea, Japan. I think we need to take all of these issues on face value and deal with them as they are. So whether it's an issue around barley, I mean, these sorts of issues crop up from time to time. I think you've got to deal with it on its merits and not to seek to conflate it with other geopolitical issues. I think if we deal with it on its merits, that's the best approach for Australia to take. And I know that's the approach that Simon Birmingham and the government more broadly is taking to any of these individual issues.
Okay, Michael Sukkar, appreciate your time this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Peter.